Hello and welcome to the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast with me, Clive Barber, and my good mate, Noel Tom. For the days when you can't ride your bike, there's always the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast. A couple of weeks ago, I spotted a company on Instagram called Moto Junkies who operate training and trips out of their amazing looking base in Wales. And I thought I should speak to these guys and get them to come on and tell us what they're doing and what they're offering. Little did I know that the legend behind Moto Junkies was one Steph Jeavons. Now, if you haven't heard of Steph, you should really check out a couple of podcasts she did back in 2016 and 2018 with Adventure Rider Radio and find out what she actually did. She spent 4 years travelling the world, got to all 7 continents, including Antarctica. She's a bit of a legend. Here we go. I got a message from one of our women listeners who's just started trail riding. And she bought a Himalayan. She lives in Wales, funnily enough. And she got in touch with the local TRF. And the person that responded was another woman. And this other woman said, oh, no, you're probably not right for the TRF. Because, you know, these lads all ride enduro bikes and blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, that's another woman saying that to a woman, right? I was utterly shocked and quite taken aback. And I can understand why, because it's a Himalayan and it's quite rocky in Wales, but there must be somewhere she can ride.
There is. We run with Himalayans and Hondas, and so yes, there are plenty of places you can ride with a Himalayan, but there is an element of truth in what she's saying, in the fact that the TRF is not what it used to be. You know, it used to be flat caps and pottering. Now it's completely taken over by those fast riding enduro guys, and we get so many people coming to our training days and stuff saying, I tried with the TRF, frightened the life out of me, I want to go back to basics, I want to learn properly. So yeah, I mean, I've never ridden with the TRF, but it does seem to have changed massively.
I went out with them on a beginner's ride just because I had a day that I could go out, and it was completely the opposite round our way. I think it just depends on the volunteers that actually run the group, isn't it? Because I think the oldest guy there was probably about 87 or something like that, and we were just stopping every 15 minutes for people to all catch back up and things like that. So I think it depends where you are.
Well, it does, and like I said, it's volunteers running it, and I think that's the problem. There's no sort of consistency, so you're not really sure what you're going to get, and it's a shame for...
You might have a customer there anyway. I'll refer her to you at some point.
We'll take anyone.
I just thought it'd be interesting to talk about women riders, really, and what potentially we should be doing to support women that want to get into it. Do you know, Noel, we've just changed podcast providers, and less than 4% of our listeners are women.
Wow.
Is that a surprise to you, that percentage, Steph? Was that what you would expect?
Well, 4% is very low. I would expect it to be fairly low, but that's very low. I mean, when you look at the percentage of riders now is increasing, women riders is increasing all the time. But maybe it's just the whole podcast thing, you know, actually listening and talking about bikes. You know, men like to talk about, as I call it, sprockets.
Boring technical stuff.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, maybe it's just that.
But my girlfriend will occasionally listen to this podcast, and as soon as stuff gets technical, she pretty much just turns it off. If it's about traveling and traveling experiences, she absolutely loves it. But as soon as it gets into what's the TF7 GX43, then she's just not interested.
But they have to listen to it first to realise that it's not necessarily sprockets and bollocks, and that you know.
That's us, isn't it? Sprockets and bollocks.
So annoying.
It's made up with that on it already. Don't you be stealing my catchphrase.
Proudly wear that on my chest.
And then we should talk about Moto Junkies as well. Kind of the reason I got in touch was from following you on Instagram, and your venue looks amazing.
It really is. Yeah, it's really exciting. Right now, my head is just exploding with all the millions of things that I've got to do to get this ready, and because I'm just taking over this place, and there's bookings in there, and then I've got my really busy period with Moto Junkies, and I'm trying to merge the two and then make them as one eventually, and over the next few months. And right now I'm learning about, oh my God, okay, I need to change that bed, I need to buy a new bed for there, and I need to think about bookings for there, and then I need to also get 10 people out on the road over there, and then 6 people out on the trails over there. So it's...
What is it?
Oh, well, it's an old golf club. And it was a golf club for 100 years, and it closed down a couple of years ago, and it's been the club got turned into accommodation, but it's been sort of flailing a little bit. The guy's not really been giving it that much attention. I went to look at it for a weekend to use it as a weekend event, decided to make him an offer, not to buy, unfortunately, it's £1 million property, but to lease it. And so it's all going ahead rather quickly. I only met him about 5 weeks ago, and already we've been in there and had the tractor through and
I've always had fantasies about riding through golf courses.
And me, yeah.
I'd never do it, but...
So it's a riding centre or it's a training centre?
It's going to have our training centre, but it's also going to be the start of our trail riding days and our road events and all sorts. So yeah, a bit of camping. We've got a massive campfire in one of the old bunkers that we've sort of built a fire pit in there. But it's also going to be sort of bikers and hikers and 4x4ers. And so there'll be if you just want to come and stay in the area, do some road or trail, we'll have a jet wash there for you. We can do bike storage for you. We can, there's all sorts there. So, and we'll have parts and stuff. This area doesn't have a parts shop. So if you're on the trails here, and there are thousands of people on the trails here, and you need something quickly, there's nowhere within a 50-mile radius that can provide that for you.
Where are you?
It'll be Dolgellau. So.
Oh, that's a nice part of Wales as well, isn't it?
Oh, it's lovely. Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. And we're going to set up a little bikers coffee shop there as well, so a place to ride to on a weekend. So
fantastic.
So my name's Steph Jeavons. I live in mid Wales now. I just moved from North Wales. I have what bikes do I have? I've got personally a street triple, Triumph Street Triple, which is about 10 years old, the one with the round headlights, the cute one, I have a CRF 250L. And then my business, I've got another 11 bikes, which are a split between CRF 250s, 300s, and Royal Enfield Himalayans. So
you've still got the same 250L that you went round the world on for 4 years, presumably?
Oh, well, I have, but that's not my workhorse anymore. So Rhonda, the Honda, is in Bewley National Motor Museum.
No way.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, she's with some really cool vehicles. I've got to say, I'm so proud of her to be there.
I was going to say, how many miles are on the clock of that bike now?
I think 78,000. Did use her for a couple of thousand miles of working when we got home doing trail riding and stuff. But we did 74 and a bit thousand miles around the world. She was brand new when I left. But yeah, she's in Bewley. She sells books for me from there because they've got little things saying, buy this book from the gift shop. So she's still working. But I do want her home at some point, and instead of her now as a workhorse, if you like, I've got a newer 250L, but same.
She's like a retired pony you still keep in the field and feed, but don't ride anymore.
Exactly. But I don't never say never. I hate the thought of never riding her again. She will come home and I will ride her again, but just right now she's earning me money over at Bewley.
Does the engine on that bike, does the engine still feel the same after 70,000 miles?
I didn't really notice any difference, but and it's been a couple of years since I've ridden her now because she's been in Bewley that long. But I didn't really notice that much difference, and she was never opened up during that course of that time. I just changed the oil regularly, and she kept going.
So I've got a 30,000 miles 250L. So it's really reassuring to hear that if you've got a 70 that's still running fine and doesn't use oil and is still running fine, that's great news.
Do you have an emotional attachment to your bike, Steph? Because me and Noel often have this argument. I do. I can't sell them.
What do you mean I do?
Whereas Noel, you don't. You buy them and sell them within weeks normally.
I've had the bike for the longest time.
You buy two of everything and then sell one and then sell the other.
I've got an XR650L, Steph, that I've had since 2009, and I don't think he can beat that.
I've had my KTM 400 since 2005.
Damn.
Oh.
Damn.
2013 is my oldest bike. But I am looking for a bike that's my year of birth is 1975. And I'm looking for a bike that's, 1975, so we can grow old together.
What was kicking around in 75 that you'd like?
I did see a DT which it was online somewhere and it was immaculate. And I only saw it the other day and I was like, oh my God, right year, right bike, lovely colours, immaculate, beautifully restored. And I thought that's the bike for me because I can put it down the shops on that. I can ride around my new base on that, and just enjoy it. But, not put too many miles on it. Unfortunately, it was it wasn't a bad price, but it's the wrong time. It's the right bike, right price, wrong time for me, because I've got a lot of outgoings with this new base that I didn't want to risk. I couldn't be that,
That's my favourite era of bikes as well. I'm always looking at bikes at around the 77 mark that I'd love to get. So there's the old, the RDs when they were still air-cooled, RD 250s and 400s. I was like 12 in 1977, and that's really when I started to get massively into motorbikes.
Were you riding bikes as a kid?
No, not as a kid. I was riding horses as a kid. My parents couldn't afford a motorbike, although they were bikers themselves, and there was a Honda, I don't know what it was it a CB250 or something that was sat in the garden for a long time, that my mum and dad had both ridden. Couldn't really afford to run a car with 3 kids, a car and a motorbike, and so that was sat there. And it was going to be one of my dad's projects that he never got round to. Eventually went to Eddie the Scrap Man.
So your mum rode the bike as well?
They both did, yeah. And both still do. But I didn't. My grandmother had horses, so I was very lucky to have that. And then I didn't start riding bikes myself until, God, how old was I? I passed my test when I was 21. But I was pillioned before that, and I was sneaking onto the back of the rebellious neighbour's bike when I was about 11, because they had a long driveway and he used to ride up and down. His dad was a biker too, and he used to, as a probably 13-year-old, he'd be riding up and down the road, and I'd jump on the back, much to my parents' dismay, and they'd be screaming at me, "Get off that bike!" and all that.
What made you want to do that at 21 then? It just looked fun?
Well, it was in the blood really, and yeah, it looked like fun. I was sat on the back for a long time, but sitting on the back wasn't going to be a permanent option for me. It looked far too exciting to be in the front. So
what sort of bikes were you riding in your 20s?
Well, my first bike was that wasn't when I was in my 20s. That was earlier though, but maybe 18 or something. I had an MZ50 was my first bike, and I painted the tank purple to go with my purple Dr. Martens.
Yeah. Painting a great picture here.
Yeah, and that got stolen, unfortunately. I can't believe who would have wanted to steal it, but they did. And then I can't remember, it was GS, no, not GS 500 out after that, GPZ. Right.
Kawasaki.
Yeah, Kawasaki GPZ 305 or whatever it was the 300. That was what I got after I passed my full test.
Were you traveling on bikes earlier on, or was it just sort of riding locally?
No, it was just riding locally, and for a long time I didn't ride that much because I had my son quite young, and so again, car motorbike situation, it had to be the car because I had a dog and a kid and shopping to get and all that kind of stuff, and so car took priority. Motorbike took the back seat. I couldn't really afford hobbies that much, so it was later when my son got older and that kind of thing that I got into bikes a lot more and could afford to do it a lot more. That was around. Well, I don't know what year it was, but I got into off-roading in 2008, and that's when my serious riding kind of started in a way. I rode all through my life, but bits and bobs along the way. And then 2008, I started off-roading, and that's when the real passion and the cravings for taking it off onto bigger adventures began.
Was that a big revelation for you then when you first went off-road as to how much more fun it was than riding on the road?
Exactly, yeah. It really was a revelation. I mean, it was terrifying. I signed up with my sister for a trip across South Africa to raise money for some different charities, and I hadn't done any off-roading, so we did 2 days off-road training before we went with a guy called Mick Extance. Didn't do very well at it, actually, and then went off on this big trip across South Africa with 100 guys.
When you say didn't do very well, what, you just were falling off a lot, or you just found it?
A lot, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I didn't come particularly naturally, I don't think. It surprises me now. I do training for other people and with my business, and I see how well, I get a lot of women riders who come along and they go, "Oh God, I'm terrible at this," and I go, "No, I can still empathize with that. I remember how that feels." And it was so fairly recent, we're already talking 2008, that I think it really helps to be able to get to share that with those people that are now learning, because I think, no, I did that. Yeah, I remember doing that. And this is how I got over it, maybe, or whatever. But I did it a lot. It was a baptism of fire for me. So I had 2 days learning, went off and did a 2-week trip across South Africa, where I hadn't even learned to stand up properly, had no confidence, but I just went for it anyway. Thought I was going to die every day. And then thought, never again, never again. Got to the end and went, I made it. That's brilliant. I want to do more. And so I went home and set up an off-road school with the guy that taught me, who was Mick Exton.
Well, he's a Dakar legend, isn't he?
We sort of drunkenly said we would set up an off-road school together. We just did when we were both sober again. He said, well, when are we doing it then? I'm like, what? Yeah, okay. But I was a mortgage advisor at the time, and it wasn't a good time, 2008. So it just worked. It was a good time to just go, why not? Why the hell not? So we went for it, and then Honda came on board within about 6 months. So
one of my favourite stories about Mick is, whether it's true or not, I think I read it in MCN, is that he'd ran out of fuel on a stage in the Dakar, and they would only give him a certain amount of fuel, and he basically he knew it wasn't going to be enough to get to the finish of the day, and he basically sort of said to himself in his own head, if they don't give me more fuel, I'm actually going to have to kill the guy to get some more fuel so we can actually go and finish the stage.
Does that ring true, Steph, with what you know?
Yeah, it rings very true. He is the softest and the toughest guy I've ever met in my life. He will go all gooey over. When he first moved to Wales to set up this school with me, he went all gooey at lambs and at puppies, and oh my God, he just turned into this little kid. And yet, I've seen him. I've been with him when he's dislocated his knee, and he's just gritted his teeth and gone, I'm fine, And he's so single-minded. That's what gets him through all those Dakars. Really, is that sort of absolute, regardless whatever happens, I'm getting to the end. So different breed, really.
So in amongst all this going on, how is the dream of the trip? How does that come about?
It kind of evolved. It'd been there for years, so I always wanted to travel. And then the motorbikes became more of a serious option. And so I merged the two together. So I wanted to travel the world. I was getting into the bikes. I was surrounded by inspirational people, not only Mick, but people that came and rode with us because we were sponsored by Honda, like John McGuinness and, a few other names. People that once you meet them, you think, well, these are just ordinary guys, right? And obviously very talented. And I'm not one of those very talented people. But I thought, well, what's the difference between them and somebody else? And am I the sort of person that can go and do something? And I thought, well, why don't I do my traveling around the world on a motorbike and just go? And then it became I was going to go for 7 continents. I think my confidence just grew and grew. And my ambition grew and grew. The traveling around the world was just in search of freedom, really, as corny as that sounds. And I had my freedom taken away from me when I was about 20. So I got heavily involved in drugs when I was about 18, something like that. As a consequence of my addictions, I ended up in prison for nearly 2 years. And that's one way to kind of make you appreciate freedom, And it's an adventure, but it's not one I wish to repeat. It also, it toughened me up, and it did a lot of things for me. So I don't wish to go back and change anything bizarrely. But it also made me realize that it doesn't really matter if I was willing to go for it and fail because I'd already reached bottom, and so as I climbed the ladder, I wasn't worried about coming down a couple of rungs, and so I could do climbing and then fail and try again, but I was never going to be that low again. And so, it's bizarre, but it really did give me something in a way. I suppose you take the positives where you can, and I suppose that's what I did. But that really made me yearn for freedom, and the traveling, riding off into the sunset was the ultimate freedom for me.
Had the CRF come out before you started thinking about this trip, or did it come out afterwards?
It came out afterwards. So I'd been thinking about it for a while, but then I was just finishing with the off-road school. We were just sort of drawing to a close on that with the partnership. And I decided to bring forward my plans. And at that time, the CRF 250 was coming out. So I then went back to Honda and said, look, give me one of those bikes and I'll prove to you that it's a good bike and it's reliable and trustworthy. And so I did.
Do you feel like you're one of the first people? I would cite you as one of the first people to prove that it could be done on that particular bike.
Yeah. Well, I was. And I think at the time, people were still of that. They hadn't quite converted. So it was still that sort of two minds. And a lot of people were still saying at that point, and to my face, that, I'd bitten off more than I could chew and that this was a crazy bike to go on because it was too small. And, although people had done on smaller bikes before, maybe not around the world, well, whatever, they'd done big trips like Ed March had done, not around the world, but he'd done some big trips on a C90. So, but there was still that mentality and still that sort of people thinking, you idiot, why aren't you going on a bigger bike? But it was the perfect bike for me.
Do you still get a lot of people turning up on big bikes at your schools, or do you just exclusively use your own?
No, we allow other people to bring their bikes, but we tend to advise before they come. So we have a chat with them before they come, so they don't just turn up and shock us with a, if they're good enough, if they're a good enough rider, you can take anything around these trails. And with the right tyres, you can take anything around these trails. I wouldn't advise it for somebody who's just starting out. And we still get those questions of, I've got a GS 1200. Can I come and do I want to get into trail riding. Can I come and do your thing? And it's like, well, you can come and do it, but I'd leave the GS at home for certainly until you get to grips with off-roading, because it's a whole, and I don't think they appreciate how different it is to road riding. So the smaller the better as far as learning is concerned.
So you set out on the trip. Was your intention to film as much of it as you could?
No, I did get Austin Vince grabbed me at one of the shows and before I left and say, at the London show before I left, and say, come on mate, I'll give you a quick tour of around the show, and I'll give you some tips on filming. And he picked some inanimate object up and pretended it was a camera and took me around and gave me a load of hints and tips on how to film. And I thought, well, I'm not really that interested in filming, to be honest. And I never went out to do, there's so many people do it so professionally now. It's so impressive what they come back with.
You did film bits of it though, didn't you?
I did, absolutely. And it came later rather than sooner. So I started doing sort of little bits of video diaries. And then later on, I would sort of have I'd give myself little projects. So I'd say, right, let's spend a month here doing a little loop around here, and let's do a little movie. And because it was fun, but it certainly wasn't my intention when I left. So I did learn a lot as I went along, and all those little tips that Austin gave me with whatever it was he was holding as a camera did come back to me.
But you did write a book.
I did write a book. Yeah, that was during lockdown. Well, I wrote a book on the road called Embrace the Cow, which is just hints and tips on how to get around the world on a budget, basically. And then I was, quite a small book, digital only. And then when I got home, I kept saying I was going to write a book, and then lockdown happened, and that was the perfect opportunity. So when I got over the lockdown issue of what am I going to do, my to-do list is gone. I'm going to teach the dog how to use the treadmill, and we're going to be on Britain's Got Talent. Once I got bored of that, I then went, oh, do you know what? I hate that book. I could write the book now. So, so yeah, I wrote the book. I had actually started the draft a little bit before and then put it to one side, and then I sort of really knuckled down during lockdown and got on with it.
And you've made a lot of notes on the road as you went along.
I'd made a lot of notes, mostly, well, I'd written my blog. So that was those were public notes. And then I didn't write a private diary apart from those days where I was really miserable. And I saw it as being, my blog was very honest, but I didn't want to also just moan about stuff. So there were times where I thought, no, this is me just having a moan, and I'm feeling self-indulgent, and there's a lot of self-pity going on, so I'm just going to write this down personally and not share it with anybody. So my personal diary was very depressing, but I did still take bits of that for the book. So
where were you at your lowest then, would you say, on that trip?
Probably my lowest was in South America. There was a time in South America when I'd had a lot of, I was in it was more like Central America, really. So I'd had a lot of injuries. Well, first of all, I started off coming off the boat from Antarctica. So it was a major high. And then I had that crash that you get after a major high. Didn't really know what I was doing or for what purpose anymore. And how could I ever top that amazing feeling? And what was the point now? Was I just riding home, or was I going to make something of this last leg? And when I say last leg, I still had the whole of the Americas and the whole of Africa to do. But it felt like I was just crunching miles by then, and I'd had my high. So I had to kind of reassess there, and I locked myself away for a while and didn't have any, sensory stuff going on. So I watched movies in a dark room for a few days.
Yeah, well, I'd imagine that's a really hard mindset to get out of, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had that on small trips, on 2-week trips. I've had that where I feel like there's a mission's almost been accomplished, and now what the hell am I doing? I'm just riding home. It feels completely different, no matter how far away you are.
Exactly, and I had to make the decision as to whether I was just going to race home and get back as quickly as possible. But racing home across 2 continents on a 250, that's a lot to sort of deal with. So I decided eventually that I was going to slow it down rather than speed up, and really enjoy it. and give myself those times away from the beautiful scenery and whatever, the in search of all these lovely things. You just enjoy it. It was a way of life now, not a race to achieve something.
We should actually tell people, because we do get quite a lot of new people listening to the podcast who may not be familiar with the big ride that you actually did. And the one you wrote the book about. So we probably should. Now, again, I think when we had Ben on a couple of weeks ago, I pointed people to go and listen to the Adventure Rider Radio podcast that you did, because I think you did one on the trip in 2016, and then you did one, I listened to it this week, you'd been home for about 3 weeks, I think, and you talk about actually the trip at quite some length. So I'll kind of point people to go and search out those podcasts, but just tell us briefly what you actually did and what you achieved.
I might look into those myself. I can't remember. I set off in 2014 on a exactly 4-year journey around the world. I covered all 7 continents on my 250L, as we've already mentioned. I did 74,000 miles, 54 countries, and became the first person to circumnavigate the globe and ride on all 7 continents.
So did you know it was going to be 4 years when you set off?
No, I'd planned about 18 months, and I'd asked my parents to look after my dog for about 18 months. And I had a budget for about 16 months, and it was a tiny budget anyway. So, but I kind of hoped that it would last longer, And the exactly 4 years thing just came about by the fact that I was nearing home, and then thought, hey, hang on a minute. I could get home on the same day from the same event that I left on. How rock and roll would that be? And so I what did I do? I think I must have slowed it down, or certainly timed the last leg to make it that day.
And so that's basically the books that you wrote. Embrace the Cow, which was the one you wrote on the road, which is kind of the advisory one. And then Home by 7 was your lockdown book, available in all good bookshops, Bewley Motor Museum and Amazon.
You can also buy them from my website, stephjeavons.com.
Oh, there we go. Even better. Get them from there. So you also did more recently. You've done another trip in the Himalayas.
I did. I took a group of, how many were there of us? 22, something like that, 22 women, I think. Massive bunch up to Everest Base Camp via Tibet. So we started in Nepal and Kathmandu, and then rode up into Tibet, and then across and up to Everest Base Camp.
Can you ride all the way to Everest Base Camp then?
Yeah, so there's like 2 base camps, which most people maybe aren't aware of. I certainly wasn't until we started this trip, but there's one in Nepal and one in Tibet. So the one in Nepal, you can't ride all the way up to. The one in Tibet, you can. And actually the last bit of it is, so the going up to base camp isn't the difficult bit. It was the getting to that point in the first place, getting up onto the plateau into Tibet and across, and then pretty much good tarmac, believe it or not. It's like switchbacks all the way up to the base camp. It's not quite as you would imagine. Obviously, you've still got to deal with altitude. It became quite a problem for a few of us. Nothing too serious, but a lot of extreme headaches. And we had one lady collapse, but she was okay. We had a brilliant doctor with us and loads of oxygen and all sorts of drugs to help us keep going. The headaches were unreal. I've been higher than that on my motorbike and didn't have any issues. At base camp that night, I had the worst headache I've ever had in my life. It felt like my head was going to explode,
I remember there was a very dramatic bit of video of you riding through, somebody struggling to get through, almost like you were riding through a waterfall.
Karen Waterboard Anderson, she forever known as. She was one of the women that made it, because only about half made it in the end. But that was the most difficult bit, was the first section up to the Tibetan border, because we had unreal rainfall. I mean, it was just on the cusp of the beginning of the rainy season anyway, but they had record-breaking rain that year, and landslides and closed roads, and therefore all traffic was going up this mountain road to the Tibetan border, which became rutted and muddy and in some cases impassable until the military could come and dig it out. And then all the trucks creating these ruts.
And was that on Enfield?
Rocks into the rut. That was on Royal Enfields, on the Himalayas. But you just sit in a rut and hope for the best and keep going with the altitude and the waterfalls that we had to ride through. It was pretty exciting, yeah.
But you must look back on that as being a great trip, do you?
It was brilliant. And I think, in time, everything becomes brilliant, doesn't it? That's the thing. So one thing I said to the women at the beginning, because a lot of these women hadn't done anything quite so spectacular before. And in this sense, I mean, they're all amazing women in their own right. But they came from all different backgrounds, and most of them were fairly new to this type of adventure. In fact, I don't think any of them had done anything like this before. And so I gave them a bit of a pep talk beforehand, and sort of said, right, okay, this is going to happen emotionally. You're going to start off excited and scared, and then you're going to start getting frustrated and angry at times, and then you're going to be happy, and then you're going to be miserable, and then all these things. And then when things go wrong, you're going to start looking for someone to blame, and then, and then you're going to blame yourself, and then all these things. At the end, you're going to be like, wow, I did it. And that will be where you get your strength from. And that's exactly what happened, really. So some women who pulled out, who never got past those barriers, some had injuries.
Had people applied for it? Was it an ad in a paper? How did it happen?
Yeah, so people applied for it, and
was experience necessary, or was it?
Not off-road experience wasn't necessary, but then we hadn't really planned on this much off-road. It hadn't this much extreme off-road. But they were told they had to go and get training. So as long as they had a road license and they were mentally up for it, and to a certain extent physically up for it, they had to have a certain level of fitness. We were good to go. And that was the whole point, was to get this challenge going. Like I said, I did Enduro Africa for 2 weeks with no experience other than 2 days. And I got through it, and it changed my life. So that was what we were kind of aiming for, really, was that life-changing experience. And for them and for me too, it was a massive experience and probably life-changing for a lot of them.
And did a lot of women apply for it? Was it oversubscribed?
Yeah, we were oversubscribed. Yeah, we had a waiting list. And they were from all over the world as well. And like I said, we had yoga instructors, chemists, all sorts of backgrounds.
I hesitate this now because it just, as a bloke, it sounds potentially a bit patronising about talking about what do we do to encourage and support women that want to ride.
I know what you mean, and I feel the same way. Like when I first did a women-only group years ago with the Mick Extons, when we were doing the off-road school together, he convinced me to do a women-only day, and I thought, what do we need to do that for? And I was almost defensive about it, and I was like, we don't need to do that. I'm learning with the guys. Why, what's the problem? We're no different. But I did it under duress, and haven't stopped doing them since, because I've realised that I really enjoyed doing them. And I'm not, I at the time didn't think I only had a few select female friends. Most of my friends are guys. And so, because I suppose what I'm into, and back then it was very much a male orientated, environment. And I thought, God, I would hate to be with a group of women. This will be too much for me, too much sort of girliness. And actually, the first one I did, I loved it, thoroughly enjoyed it. I learned that we are very different in the way we learn, in the way we support and encourage. And that makes it sound like I'm knocking guys, because it's not at all. But the way they kind of come together as a group is really cool. And the way we learn is very different. So, of course, we are different. Off-roading particularly is a physical sport. And so for example, the Everest Base Camp trip, when I got the phone calls from the women interested in doing it, or the emails, the first thing that probably 85% of them asked was, am I going to be good enough? I don't want to be the person at the back. And that's what we worry about more than anything, and that's why women's groups are important, because they're going to feel more supported in a women's groups where they think they're less likely to be the person at the back. Whereas if you're a load of stronger, you guys are stronger generally, then you're more likely to be the one holding people up. And we don't like to hold people up. As women, we don't like to put people out, and be a nuisance. And so it is important. And also, when you're teaching a guy or a girl, a guy will say, you'll say to a guy, pull that throttle back and go as fast as you can over there. And they'll say, okay. And they won't ask questions, they'll just do it. Whereas a girl, I'm obviously generalizing massively here. Whereas a girl might say, well, why and what's going to happen when I do? And I think that even in schools, we're appreciating that now. There are differences in the way we learn. And I think it's great to recognise the differences. And personally, I love it. So it's a great part of my job. Last week, I was out taking a group of women bikers around Wales, road riding, drinking wine in the evenings and beer and playing music and eating great food, and then just riding around Snowdonia during the day. And it was great. We had everything from a 125 to a 1200 hog. And it was great. Women are coming into this sport in droves right now, and into the community, and generally they're being welcomed.
But would you say the choice of bike is an issue? My girlfriend, who doesn't have many issues, by the way, but one of the issues has always been finding me, number one, is finding a bike that's light enough. She's obsessed with how heavy will it be to pick it up, but also low enough. And there doesn't seem to be a massive choice of light, low bikes that you can take off road. There's the Cero. We in the end found an SL230, a Honda import, but the choice isn't massive, is it? Is this an issue for you?
How tall is she?
I'm going to say 5'4".
Same height as me. Biggest thing is building confidence, and that will start making the obsession with light, low bikes start to decrease. Although it never goes away. I mean, I ride a 250L and I still have a lowering link on it, and I cut the seat out. I don't need it. I can ride it without. But when it comes to those silly little lofts, it's usually because my foot didn't quite reach the ground, and so. But it's usually just funny and we get on. But it's exhausting having to pick the bike up all the time if that's happening. So as you get more confident, you'll do that less and you'll worry about it less. And there's also ways of getting on and off the bike. Like the way I get on a tall bike is by getting it moving, almost like I'm vaulting on a horseback. And I'll get it moving, step on one peg, and then I just throw my leg over and we're already going. And off we go. And I do the same getting off. I do it at gates. It's less energy. And it doesn't matter about how tall it is, and I get off on my bike sort of here, sort of shoulder height. You have to have that ground clearance. We can't make them too low, otherwise we're restricting what we can do with them and where we can go with them.
Would you say it's important to be able to get your foot flat on the ground, or would you say just a tiptoe is enough?
I don't think I've ever had my feet flat on the ground on any bike. I've got short legs, and no, I've never had my feet flat on the ground. So no, it's not important. It's about practicing getting over that and appreciating it. Yeah, it is a bit of a handicap. I mean, I see guys with 6 foot guys with long legs, and they look like they're on a 100cc bike when they ride the same bike as me. I think, oh, I hate you. I wish I could just have those stabilizers, but I haven't got those stabilizers. So stop comparing to those guys. You deal with what you've got to deal with. This is my problem, nobody else's. And I think it is difficult. And when we do our train for trails and stuff, which is sort of the foundations of getting into off-roading in the first place, we have lowered 250s, and we have girls who are 5'1", I think is the shortest we've had.
Wow.
And again, we start by teaching them how to get on and off it and just feel a little bit of confidence. And there will be times they drop it at low speeds because they've got to put their foot down, as I said, and there's nothing there. But you learn to find that rock. You learn to not sit centrally in the bike, but to just get yourself over to one side, and you learn to get off it by swinging a leg over. There's lots of things you can do.
So have you got any advice for blokes like us, if a woman joins our group for a ride out? Is there anything we should do to make them feel more welcome?
Oh, that's a good question. I've never been asked that before. What should we do to make them feel more welcome? Well,
I suppose it's the same for any new rider, I guess. I mean, you don't. What we normally do with people that join us for a ride, we take them up the hardest, steepest, rockiest bit of the Lake District we can find and watch them fall off and laugh at them. But I'm guessing that's probably not what we should be doing.
Not necessarily, although it is good fun, I must admit. But I think if somebody's in your group that's a newbie, whether it's male or female, you keep an eye out for them, and I think the not being patronising is the key, and it's not that difficult. You just treat them like, how would you feel if you were the slowest person in the group, or whatever, or the learner? And how would you...
That's a question for you, Noel.
How would you...
Well, you keep saying stuff about riding at the back. That's my preferred position in the group.
It's
I
mine
love
too.
being. Yeah, I hate if I ever lead. I hate leading because I just think I may as well be on my own. The thrill for me is watching the bikes in front of me.
Absolutely, I totally agree. I think it's, and once we're a lovely bunch of people bikers, aren't we? And this is one thing I still have with the groups that we have. We have a mixed bunch. We don't just have women on the women only groups. We have women and novices and sort of, whatever. We have a lot of mixed ability groups as well that we take out, and we sort of stress that this is about the social aspect as much as it is about the riding. It's about the, let's all get to know each other, and therefore and it's about the countryside and enjoying that. And so once we get that into people's heads, you've then got a team going, and nobody cares if you're fast or slow, or whether you can do a wheelie, or whether you're going to fall off. And just naturally, somebody will come and point a laugh and then help you pick your bike up. That's what we do. We have a giggle. And I think the initial fear before you get to that point is that people are going to be angry at me for maybe not being quite as good. And men and women the same have that same issue when they come to us a lot. It's like, well, some are overconfident and some are underconfident, and majority are underconfident. And so they'll come thinking am I going to be able to cope with this? And then after a couple of hours, they're like, this is great fun. It doesn't matter that I fell off 3 times because it was a giggle and somebody got a great photo, and we're going to have a laugh about it later over the beer, and we'll have Dick of the Day in the evening, which will highlight all these things, and getting up with yourself really and getting on with it. And
That's probably a good little spot to tell us now a little bit more about Moto Junkies, the type of courses you offer and the rides that you provide and the accommodation and all that kind of stuff.
Moto Junkies is basically does a combination of things. So we're based in Snowdonia in Wales, and we have hire bikes. So we have a mixture of Enfields and a mixture of and Hondas. And we're just moving to a new base. So what we used to do was use lots of different bases where we would run like trail riding tours or road riding tours, and you can come as one or as a group. You can join a group or you can come with your own group, and we'll take you out and show you the best of Snowdonia out on 2 wheels, really, road or trail or both. But we also do training, so we introduce you to trail riding, so level 1 and level 2, which is level 1 is absolute basic, never been on an off-road bike before, want to learn. This is a proper hold your hand, talk you through, have a giggle, and it's on private ground as well, so you don't even need a license for that one.
Is that for people that can already ride a motorcycle?
Yeah, although we have taken people who have never ridden a bike, but that needs to be on a one-to-one basis, otherwise we're holding back the rest of the group. So we can do one-to-ones for that, but yeah, so the level 1 you have to have you have to have some ability, but not necessarily off-road. It's just you need to be able to use a bike. And then level 2 builds you up to the next level, and then we've got all these adventures that you can come and join if you so wish. And like I said, we're a business, but we're also a platform, and a way for people to meet like-minded people. And we have, I can't tell you how many times I've had messages from people saying, I'm meeting John that I met a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to go trail riding in the Peak District, or we're going to do this together. And then this whole community forms, and it's so lovely. And they still always come back, even though they've gone off on their own and got their own social network going on. They don't need us anymore as such, but they still come back for the giggle. And if I need volunteers to help dig out a trench or something, there's always a load of people that do that as well. So
how long is that course? Is it a 2-day thing?
Level 1 is a 1 day, level 2 is a 1 day, and we run them back to back, so you can do one or both days at the same time. So we had lots of different bases for that, and now we've just acquired a new base in Dolgellau, which is perfect, sort of central to Snowdonia and to the trails and to the roads. And we've got accommodation there now. We've got training ground. We've got everything in one big workshop. We've got everything in one place, which is, I sound like a big billboard now, but I'm so excited about it, honestly. Like when I was traveling, I was dreaming. So that was my one big dream, was to go off traveling and do all these things and maybe prove something to myself as well. And then, but as I was sort of turning back for home, I was starting to dream about the other bit of my brain that wants to have this little bit of Wales, and that I can call my home, and I can invite bikers to come and have a coffee or pour over a map or just come trail riding. And this is it. This is the dream, the second dream coming true. It's absolutely gorgeous. Like I said, it's an old golf course. It's 20 acres. It's just beautiful.
It is lovely. I saw your pictures on Instagram, which is why I kind of got in touch, because it does look absolutely lovely. And I'm thinking this looks like an amazing venue. People sitting around fires, staying over, doing rides from there. So I recommend everybody has a look on the Moto Junkies Instagram account, and also motojunkies.co.uk.
Thank you.
There was a golf club there for 100 years.
Yeah. And it was described as one of the most beautiful golf clubs in the world, but unfortunately it just stopped working. So the golf club, I don't know anything about golf, but the golf club members, they were getting disgruntled about something or other, I don't know. But then there was also the business rates that were killing the business, which they've now changed the way they do business rates. The locals were, I don't know, there just wasn't enough of them or whatever. And then the owner, who I'm now leasing it off, he was a professional golfer, and he'd run it for about 20 years and just decided it wasn't really working anymore financially. And so he closed it down and it became accommodation, but the golf course itself wasn't being used. He sold some of it off and kept 3 holes, so that's hence the 20 acres. Turned the club into accommodation, but it really has just been sat there not being used to its full potential. So I went along and said, I've got an idea. And it turns out he's a biker as well.
That's kind of surprising because mainly we all realise as bikers that golf's a bit shit and motorbikes are brilliant.
This is what was the saving grace. This is what got me the deal, was the fact that he was a biker himself. He'd done the Manx in his 20s, and done very well in the Manx. And then he became a professional golfer for some bizarre reason. I think he was just lost as to what to do with it. And so when I came along and did this, we started talking bikes. I said, well, what if I put a track over there? Are you sure you don't mind? He says, no, I'll help you and I'll come riding with you. I'm like, oh, okay. We connected pretty well. And otherwise, sometimes you're looking for a farmland or something. And as soon as you mention motorbikes, no, doors closed. And I've had so many failed attempts at getting land and getting something like this. And it's failed every time because of the motorbike situation. But now we've got that. And also Till Hill Forestry Management Company have just agreed to rent as a forestry that I used many years ago, just around the corner from there as well. So now we have 5,000 acres of forest to play in right next door. So like I said, it's a dream come true for real. Yeah.
So potentially I could bring my two older lads down who don't have motorbike licenses, and they could learn to ride there and have plenty of places to go out and try their new skills. They are idiots though, so maybe not.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I mean,
I did think about going into the day-to-day on the road kind of stuff. I don't know what do you think? Is that something that would be interesting to people?
From the trip?
Yeah. So I'm just kind of thinking the practicalities of, it's the stuff people don't really talk about. They don't necessarily include in the books, like, getting your tyres changed and bikes serviced and food availability. Or is it a non-thing because you just go into shops and you buy it, or you find a garage and they change the tyres for? I mean, I've only really travelled on motorbike in Europe, and it's got everything you need, isn't it? You just go to a town and get what you need. But I'm guessing if you're in Central America, it might be a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, tire changes when you get a puncture, of course, that's the one thing that I was going to say really good at, but I'm not fast. When I see these guys who are just like so competitive for how quickly they can change a tire, I'm very good at it. It'll take me an hour to change a tire, but I can still do it. But I actually only needed it 4 times in 4 years, like one puncture a year. I've had that many in a week back home, so I don't.
It's funny, isn't it? It's funny how some people sometimes are cursed with them, aren't they? And others, people go around the world with, like you say, one puncher. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I think the quality of your inner tubes is important, which now we really are talking sprockets and bollocks, aren't we? But the quality of your inner tubes is very important, and how far you let your tyre wear down as well, of course, and of course the pressure. Having the right pressure for the right terrain. Most of mine was just luck, I think.
Did the bike break down in any other way?
Broke down once in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam, and that was the starter relay. So it was a quick, easy fix because I managed to get the part very quickly. But the funniest bit was having to be towed by one of the locals through the traffic to get me to somewhere where I could get it fixed. And he offered to tow me. No, it wouldn't bump start. We tried bump starting, it wouldn't bump start. So I don't know why, actually. I can't remember the details why it wouldn't. But anyway, we got it going by him towing me through the traffic. And that was probably one of the scariest bits of my journey. And I'm going, no, I won't fit through that gap. I've got luggage. But we survived.
But it was easily fixed.
It was easily fixed, with the right part, easily fixed. And I don't know. I think just along the way, I wasn't great at general maintenance, really. And my sprockets and stuff would run ragged before I bothered changing them. And the chains would be hanging off before I went, I suppose I should do something about that. And I did stop once to get my chain lubed by a garage in Guatemala. And no, not Guatemala.
I'm going to edit you two out and just go, isn't it Nicaragua, surely?
My memory is so bad. But I was going through Nicaragua and I needed oil, lube, my chain lubing, and I stopped in this little garage and I pointed to this guy. I said, can you, lube my chain? And he was like 83 or something, I would guess. And he sat down reading the paper, and he got up and went to give me his seat and got his grandson out to to come and lube the chain, which he did with engine oil and poured way too much of it on. But I was so hot and tired that I was, yeah, you do it, and just give it a bit of a knot, give it a bit of a tighten for me. But as I was about to leave, after having him sort of butchered my chain and all that, he, the old man who didn't speak any English kind of said to me, sort of looked at me and said, "You and me?" And he did the finger rubbing together thing, do you want to get it on? And I went, no, because I said "Cuánto," as in how much, and he did, well, he took me by the elbow and tried to take me in the back room. And this is an 18.
The you and me finger thing. I mean, that never works, does it?
Have you tried it?
I've never had success with that. Not once.
But yeah, and I loved it because I said, "Oh, no, I'll pay you if you don't mind," kind of thing, in my sign language, and it came to about £1.20 or something, and I thought, wow, that's all I was worth. That's the most insulting thing. But I waved goodbye, and he waved goodbye, and there was no insult or offence taken, or it was lovely. It was actually quite funny. Made my day.
And were you anxious about mechanical issues?
No, I wasn't. I was. Oh gosh, this sounds like an advert for Honda, but I was riding a Honda, and
yeah, but people ask that a lot, don't they? I've been on the sort of relatively short trips I've done. People have often said to me afterwards, "Weren't you worried about breaking down? And what would you do if you broke down?" And I would just sort of think, well, I probably won't break down, and if I do,
when something does happen, it's you learn to relax, don't you? And I think the more you travel, the longer you keep going. There are pluses and there are benefits, and there are sort of some serious negatives for riding long distance. But one of them is that it does become a way of life, and you do totally relax into the journey, and you don't worry anymore. I didn't worry about money. I didn't feel part of any kind of society. I didn't feel like anything really was relevant to me in a good way. I felt like I was just passing through, and therefore even rules didn't really apply to me. You were totally this kindred, this free spirit. And so I stopped worrying. I didn't know, well, I've barely got any money left, but hey, what have I got to lose? All I've got is what I've got on my bike. And so breaking down was never a big worry, because when things had gone wrong, somebody was usually there to come and help you, or you figured something out for yourself. I mean, it's amazing. Everybody will tell you the same thing that's traveled, that something happens, the universe provides,
It's the lesson everyone seems to learn, isn't it, on these trips?
Yeah,
if they don't
absolutely.
already know it. Yeah.
Have you got any other languages?
Welsh. I speak Welsh.
Yeah.
That's handy. In Wales?
Isn't there a Welsh community in Argentina or something?
There is, in Patagonia, I did visit one of them, a place called Trelew. I visited the grave of the first woman to have died out of the ship that went across from Wales to find a new world and preserve their culture and all that kind of thing. And that was all because the English were being brought into the miners' communities, and this one guy, he felt that the language was going to die and the culture, so he convinced 150 people or whatever it was onto the ship to go off and find a whole new world. And Patagonia was not quite what they'd expected, of course. But the first woman many of them died on the ship, but the first person to die on the land was called Catherine Jones, was it? But I visited her grave, but then when I was in Canada, I met her great grandson.
Wow.
Who owned a dealership.
God, really?
So
Incredible.
It's pretty cool. And funny enough, everybody's part Welsh, because of course there are a lot of people. A lot of them went from Patagonia and moved north, but everybody's. It's like when you're Irish, or when you live, I don't know, when you live in New Zealand, people say, "Oh, that New Zealand reminds me of my country," or reminds me of whatever. Wales does remind me of New Zealand, but what I'm saying is that everybody's got a little bit of Welsh in them, and they all want to tell you that little bit of Welsh that they have. And so, their great grandmother was half Welsh or something like that. It's lovely. It's really lovely.
And were you ever lonely on this trip? Because I always think about the itchy boots lady. I always think her whole mission of filming everything, that kind of must help if there are issues of loneliness, because she always feels she's in touch with someone, and she probably is in touch with people all the time. But if you're not documenting it like that, did you feel lonely at all?
I would say that the amount of followers that she has and stuff probably doesn't help it's like being in a crowded room and still feeling lonely. I think she has such a massive followers that it'd be very difficult to single out those people that you could actually lean on, you know. But so she probably still has it. But and yes, I did feel lonely at times. And even though there is this massive network of bikers all over the world who really do want to support you, and even non-bikers, they get drawn to a bike, and a woman on a bike on her own, it's such an interesting and different experience for them that day on an otherwise boring day, that people want to get involved, and so sometimes you just wish you could be on your own. Yeah, there were other times where I felt a bit lonely and thought I miss my dog firstly, and and my family and friends, but then you'd get a pick me up from a random message from your friends back home who were thinking of because this happened, or you know, and you think, oh, they are thinking of me, and they'd message me saying, we'll still be here when you get back, you know.
Was the dog still there when you got home?
Oh, that you can't ask that. What if it? Oh God! I'd hope the dog's still alive.
Yes, she was still there, and she's still here, and she's fast asleep in the corner right now. So.
I'm always interested about people that kind of make a living, who enjoy motorcycling, and then make it a kind of living or a business out of it. Does it sap the joy from it, or will you still go on a trip like into Europe or into Scotland or wherever? Has it taken any of the joy out of it, or has it enhanced it?
No, there are days where I wouldn't have gone out had it not been for the fact that I had a load of paying guests with me, and you know those days where nobody wants to back down. It's like a tornado outside, but no one wants to be the one that says we're not going. I feel like sort of being, I would just wish somebody would say let's not do this, but I still have to. And so those days, you know, that's all part of being a biker, I suppose. It's like having to go to work on a rainy day, but no, it hasn't. I still love it, and I still like to go out with my friends when I can, when I've got time, and just go and ride for the sheer pleasure of it. Because of the nature of the business I'm in, it doesn't really feel like work, or it feels like you're going out with friends and having a giggle anyway. That's what you're doing, really. And so no, there's no downside to that. I love it as much as I ever did, and I always feel like I can get better, that there's room for improvement. And so every day that I'm out on the bike, I'm trying to find that next little bit, or that, you know, go over that bump a little bit better or whatever. So I'll never get boring.
I went to Ayers Rock in 1991. I went to Australia, and there was two blokes at Ayers Rock who had two Harley Davidsons, and they had a business of just taking people on a ride from the visitor centre over to Ayers Rock, maybe ride around it, and then back to the visitor centre again.
People on the back?
Yeah, people on the back. And I thought, this is great. I'm going to go home, find, you know, somehow, if I ever come into money, I'm going to buy a big Harley Davidson, find someone else who can buy a big Harley Davidson.
You could do the Boulder Stone up at Borrowdale, couldn't you?
And just ride and just take them around the Lake District for the day. And then the more I thought about it, I thought, actually, that just might kill motorcycling for me. I might just come to hate it.
I think if I was doing the same thing, doing the same circuit every day in, day out, then yes, absolutely. But because we've got such a variety of things and a team of people, so, you know, it's not just me having to do this, and this. And you know, one of my jobs is to find new things and new routes and you know, new places and new ways to have fun with a motorbike, and so that is limitless, really.
So a massive thanks to Steph and to Moto Junkies. If you want to go and try some of her training or some of her ride-outs from their base in Dalgethley, you need to go to www.motojunkies.co.uk. That's www.motojunkies.co.uk. I'm recording this on the Tuesday before the ABR festival. I hope everybody's had a great time. I hope I've met lots of you and we've had some good conversations and recorded some good stuff to include in an episode. If we didn't get a chance to talk, please feel free to share your thoughts on the festival on our Facebook page. Be interesting to know what you thought of it. See you next time. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate your support. Don't forget you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you really appreciate what we do, you could consider supporting us on Patreon or buy us a coffee. Links are available on our website, which is tampodcast.com, tampodcast.com, where we also have a limited selection of branded stuff. But either way, please keep listening and spreading the word. See you next time.